Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Grand Prix News. As always, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This week, the Formula 1 world was rocked by the announcement that the Monaco Grand Prix will not feature on the 1995 calendar. Following the tragic events of the 1994 season, the FIA has deemed the narrow streets of Monte Carlo no longer meet the evolving safety standards of modern Formula 1. Chief among the concerns is the lack of adequate runoff areas, which are now considered essential for driver safety. But that wasn't the only major headline. Mark Blundell has been confirmed as Nigel Mansell's replacement for the opening 3 rounds of the season. McLaren cites difficulties with cockpit dimensions. 1992 world champion reportedly struggled to fit into the narrow confines of the MP4/10. The team is currently working on a revised version, the MP4/10B, which is expected to debut at the Spanish Grand Prix, along with their first major aerodynamic upgrade package. And finally, changes are afoot at the other end of the grid. Pacific Racing has announced the signing of young Polish prospect Bill Brama. After a strong campaign in International Formula 3000, where he scored 30 points and finished 3rd overall, Brama is set to become the first driver from the former Eastern Bloc to race in Formula 1. A landmark moment in sports history. And after all of that waiting, it is finally my first F1 qualifying. My first lap wasn't great, I followed my teammate into the gravel, but since I was planning to do 2 laps in a row, I kept pushing. And my first clean lap was good enough for 23rd. And with my confidence going further, I managed to gain another 2 tenths, which placed me 20th. But when things started to look positive, this happened. An engine failure meant we are out of qualifying, and with drivers and track conditions improving, that meant I dropped to 21st. 2 tenths and 2 positions behind my teammate Gashot. And with that, now let's go to the race.
Hello there. Welcome to Brazil. The weather, as so often is the case here, is just wonderful.
Gerhard Berger, 1st. David Coulthard, 2nd. Mika Hakkinen, 3rd. Eddie Irvine, 4th. Jean Alesi, 5th. Michael Schumacher, 6th. Damon Hill, 7th. Karl Wendringer, 8th. Heinz Harald Frentzen, 9th. Aguri Suzuki, 10th. Johnny Herbert, 11th. Mika Salo, 12th. Mark Blundell, 13th. Rubens Barrichello, 14th. Gianni Morbidelli, 15th. Taki Inoue, 16th. Olivier Panis, 17th. Domenico Ciatarella, 18th. Bertrand Gachot, 19th. Pierluigi Martini, 20th. Bill Brama, 21st. Jos Verstappen, 22nd. Luca Badoer, 23rd. Ukyo Katayama, 24th. Roberto Moreno, 25th. Pedro Diniz, 26th. Thank God this game has a starting grid graphic. It saved me a lot of time. This was probably the worst start I've had in any racing game ever, and I'm certain I will improve on that, right? At least I didn't get any damage, and got some experience in fighting wheel to wheel thanks to Inoue. While I was having a drag race, my teammate has made a collision with Panis thanks to his erratic maneuvers. I have no idea what was he thinking. What's most important is, thanks to that, I managed to get closer to the cars ahead, and I used that opportunity to attack Panis. First attack wasn't really successful, but thankfully the second one was, which meant only Pierluigi Martini was in the way of me overtaking my teammate. I backed out a little bit to gain some momentum, and then tried to overtake him round the outside, which didn't really work. So I was forced to once again stay behind him, and then he braked so early, I managed to go on the inside and overtake him. And then I almost lost it. And I've done it in the worst place on the track, just before start-finish straight, which meant I lost a second. One of the cars ahead had to be running with higher wings, which slowed the pack a little, which meant I gained some time by the end of the straight. About 3 tenths, not great, not terrible. By the time we entered sector 2, I grew tired of following Gashot and tried to overtake him. Some people might call this maneuver trying to take him out. I prefer to call it putting on pressure on him. It must have worked, because when we approached turn 1, I go late on the brakes, and I'm officially ahead of my teammate for the first time in this career. And that was the end of overtaking, at least for now, because the cars in front were made by competent Formula 1 teams and had some pace in them. So I just kept extending the gap to Gashot, and by the time I had to pit it was around 6 seconds, so quite a solid stint from me. If we ignore early braking and early engaging pit limiter, which lost me all of that 6 seconds in an instant. On my defense, you cannot really see this pit limit line. Somehow I managed to scrape ahead of Gashot, and once again nothing really interesting happened until lap 30, because I was finally lapped. Probably the worst possible place that could happen. I once again lost the entire gap to Gashot I created, and to make matters worse, he boxed on the same lap. How unlucky is that? But I had bigger problems, like my engine smoking. This meant I could at best do 5 laps. So I let Gashot by, and then became a mobile chicane. Engine issues tend to make your car slower in the straight line. This hindered my ability to defend against Pierluigi Martini, and there he went. I tried to have a look on the inside, didn't really succeed, and that was the end of my fight. I wasn't the only one experiencing mechanical gremlins, because David Coulthard suffered brake failure into turn 1. Thank God this runoff is so big that mitigated the impact. David is fine, his Williams is not. Same can be said about my engine. You could really easily tell my car wasn't really made to go on the grass. Nearly took out a Benetton. Thanks to my great driving skills though, I didn't. I also didn't finish my first Grand Prix, but it will improve. I hope. Up front, Berger was ahead of Alesi, Herbert was ahead of Schumacher, Barrichello was ahead of Hill, and that's it for points paying positions. Alesi's poor luck struck again, however, and gearbox failure made him retire after 62 laps from second position. A lap later, the same thing happened to Johnny Herbert, and this promoted Rubens Barrichello to third position, and the entire track went wild. Nothing changed after that, and Berger took the first win of the 1995 season, with Schumacher coming in second, and Barrichello finishing the podium. Hill was fourth, Irvine was fifth, which gave another 2 points to Jordan, and Aguri Suzuki took the last point. Now let's see Drivers' Championship. It's really not interesting, doesn't matter. It's first round of the season. What is interesting though is the fact that Jordan, thanks to those 2 points scored by Irvine, is tied with Benetton for second place. And now we are off to round 2. Autodroma de Buenos Aires. I could say many words about this track, none of them positive. So let's make it quick. My first lap was really good, it even surprised me. It was far better than anything I've said in my practice for this race, so I was really happy, and I felt I could ignore my hatred towards this track and bond with it, make some sort of connection, have a good race. And oh my fucking god. Yeah, I decided to go in the pits out of shame. In between my runs, Damon Hill and Taki Inoue found a way to have a collision in qualifying with probably less than 5 cars on the track. By the time I approached turn 1, the accident was already cleared, but even with that I didn't improve. I didn't really have to, I was already 17th, that first lap was really good, but I wanted this pace to be consistent. And it wasn't so far. So I decided to give it all on my last lap, and by the time I entered sector 3 I was 5 tenths behind. So I decided to push really hard through the last sector, maybe I'm gonna improve just slightly or at least do a similar lap time, but I went wide and spun. It wasn't all bad since my first lap was good enough to put me in 17th. And now it's time for 72 laps of this hell. Okay, so some tracks might not have the starting grid graphic. I'm not gonna bother, I'm driving in a Pacific. This start was much better than the first one, so I was definitely improving. And I managed to get on the inside into turn 1. Morbidelli had better exit out of the corner, but I once again took the inside line into turn 3 and managed to overtake him as well. I was definitely off the pace in sector 2 and lost almost a second. But same as in Brazil, I went really late on the brakes and regained most of that time when we entered sector 3. From now on, approximately until the last corner, all I had to do was just follow Salo. And that's what I did. Salo overshot the last corner, and that hindered his acceleration, and after a short drag race I went into 14th position. Once again that was maximum of my car, and after a couple of laps I started massively losing time to the cars in front. On lap 7, Panis was already 3 seconds ahead. This time it was Damon Hill who had reliability problems, with his engine exploding in Sector 1. Gerhard Berger couldn't see anything in the smoke and hit into the back of Hill. That damage was significant enough in his Ferrari that he had to retire from the race. And on lap 24 I went for my first pit stop. As my car was being serviced, I've noticed my teammate in my rear mirror. He crashed into the back of me. Gashot was in the process of retiring the car with engine problems and must be not paying attention to what's happening in front of him, and that's why we crashed. Really weird one. Once again no damage. Apparently my Pacific is a really well built car. After first round of pit stops, I was behind a group of Badar, Morbidelli and Salo. All three of them were battling really hard, so I knew if I just hang behind them, there might be an opportunity in all of that scrabble for 11th position. And that's what happened. Both Morbidelli and Badar went wide at the last corner, and I used Minardi's slipstream to go on the inside and pass him into turn 1. Lap later, Morbidelli once again went deep into the last corner. My Pacific wasn't fast enough to pass him before the end of the straight, but he had the inside line, so I had to let him by into turn 1. There was a little contact, nothing big though, no damage for me. I decided to brake early, make some room between us, but I completely forgot about the existence of Badr, and I crossed right in front of him, he crashed into me, I lost my rear wing, and that was the end of my Argentine Grand Prix, second race and second DNF in a row. Leading this race was once again a Ferrari, this time of Jean Alesi. Frenchman outmatched everyone here in Argentina, but he made contact with stricken Ligier of Aguri Suzuki. That costed him his front wing, but luckily for him it was still his in-lap, so it didn't affect his strategy. But even with that, Johnny Herbert couldn't create a gap big enough to overcut him. And after Benetton driver had finally pit, Jean Alesi regained his lead. On lap 54, the reigning champion Michael Schumacher had an issue with his gearbox. That's the second gearbox issue in Benetton team in last 2 races. And it got much worse for them because after 4 laps, Johnny Herbert had once again to retire with the same issues. This robbed Benetton from the opportunity to close the gap to Ferrari in Constructor Championship. And after 72 laps, Jean Alesi, after passing a blown up Minardi, had won the Argentine Grand Prix. Olivier Panis finished second and Hakkinen was third. David Coulthard guaranteed Williams their second 4th place in a row. Heinz-Harald Frentzen got Sauber's first points of the season, and Morbidelli did the same for Footwork. And now let's see the Drivers' Championship. This race has seen 6 new point scorers, so once again the Drivers' Championship doesn't tell us anything. But Constructors' Championship tells us that so far Ferrari is the team to beat, with a 13-point lead over Ligier. Benetton, Jordan and Williams only on 6 points each. A 14 points gap to Ferrari. After 2 races, already 8 teams have scored points. Now let's go to round 3. Round 3 brings us to newly renovated Imola. Of course, after Senna's death, the character of the track changed quite a bit, and now the starting position is much more important. So I wasn't really happy when my first lap was the slowest of all of the drivers, a 10th behind my teammate, and a 40. If you are behind a 40, that means your lap went wrong somewhere. Thankfully, my second lap has brought a much needed improvement and lifted me up to 19th, although still not all the drivers have set a lap. However, going off the track before I even started my lap was a bad omen for my 3rd qualifying attempt. Then I went off in the chicane leading to start-finish straight and completed a hat-trick by spinning in turn 1. One of the Formula 1 performances ever. Knowing what not to do on my 4th lap, I was expecting a slight improvement, but those hopes were quickly shut down after I did almost the exact same thing as I did on my 3rd lap. And that was the end of my qualifying. with me starting from 21st on Sunday.
Hello there. Welcome to San Marino. The weather, as so often is the case here, is just wonderful. Over 30 degrees and climbing. It's a fantastic day for Formula One.
Michael Schumacher, first. David Coulthard, second. Damon Hill, third. Gerhard Berger, fourth. Jean Alesi, fifth. Johnny Herbert, sixth. Mika Hakkinen, seventh. Eddie Irvine, eighth. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, ninth. Karl Wendlinger, 10th. Rubens Barrichello, 11th. Mark Blundell, 12th. Aguri Suzuki, 13th. Olivier Panis, 14th. Mika Salo, 15th. Taki Inoue, 16th. Gianni Morbidelli, 17th. Ukyo Katayama, 18th. Pierluigi Martini, 19th. Luca Badoer, 20th. Bill Brahma, 21st. Jos Verstappen, 22nd. Bertrand Gachot, 23rd. Domenico Ciatarella, 24th. Pedro Diniz, 25th. Roberto Moreno, 26th. Let me just say, this track looks absolutely stunning. And it's probably one of the best looking tracks for this game I've seen so far. The same couldn't be said about my start, which brought up the memories of Brazil. However, I still somehow managed to gain a place. No idea what happened in front, I'm just glad it did. Taking the inside line into turn 1 meant I jumped ahead of Pierluigi Martini, but I was hungry for more, so I did the same thing on Badoer. My teammate wasn't doing as good, however, with him having a crash with Ciatarella, which put him in last place. With me going for a one-stop, I didn't have the pace to overtake Salo, so I decided to park a bus, keep my position and try not to spin. This tactic resulted with me being 5 seconds behind Salo after 7 laps, but crucially, none of the cars behind were even remotely close to overtaking me, so everything was looking pretty good. Not for Damon Hill though, who had his second retirement in a row. This time, his suspension has collapsed. Bad luck also kept with Johnny Herbert, who had his third retirement in a row. His brakes have failed. Berger had to have a code brown seeing the Benetton go towards him. After 33 laps of leading a train, I finally went to pits. Please ignore that footwork. But this pit stop wasn't without its issues. I forgot to confirm my pit strategy, which resulted in me losing couple seconds, and then a Minardi crashed into me. But from previous experiences I knew my rear wing was quite strong, so I didn't worry about this. Oh, for fuck's sake. That's my third retirement in a row. I'm feeling great. From this perspective it looks quite funny. This being Imola, nothing interesting happened and Michael Schumacher won the race, with Alesi coming in second and Coulthard claiming first podium for Williams. Suzuki with strong 4th place. Berger, who used all of his luck to not have Johnny Herbert crash into him, finished 5th. And Hakkinen rounded up points paying positions. Now let's take a look at Drivers' Championship. With this win, Michael Schumacher has tied Alesi for first. Another 2 points for Berger mean he's still within a striking distance. And another strong points paying finish for Coulthard, who's now 9 points behind the leaders. When it comes to Constructors' Championship, Ferrari still dominates, with Benetton being 12 points behind. Williams, suffering from poor reliability, is tied with Leisure for third. And that's really it. Now let's go to round 4. Sunny Catalunya, driving an F1 car and getting paid for it. My life is pretty much perfect. Martin Brundle replaced Aguri Suzuki for the next 4 rounds. From other news, McLaren has finally brought their MP4/10B, so Nigel Mansell is finally here. We will see if Nigel Mansell still has the pace. The pace I was certainly lacking, because after my first lap I was 7 tenths behind Badoer's Minardi, which placed me in 24th by the time I was completing my second lap. It itself was pretty good. I found a major improvement of 6 tenths, which placed me in 23rd, but at least there was some kind of upwards trajectory, so maybe by the end of the session we will be somewhere. I was 25th when I was completing my 3rd lap, lost some time in sector 1, managed to find a 10th in sector 2, but I knew if I want to get a good qualifying position for this team, so around P20, I need to fully commit in the last corner, nearly go on the grass, but I managed to keep it onto the track, and that's another 110 found in Sector 3 alone, which places me in 23rd. There's still improvement to be done in Sector 1, so if I manage to do that, we may gain another position or two. And that's what has happened on my last lap. I was under pressure to deliver that lap, didn't crumble under it, and that's 3/10 that places us in 21st. Certainly a tough qualifying session, but we have found some speed in last minutes of it. Basically an opposite of what has happened to us in San Marino and Argentina. And now let's go to the race.
Welcome to Spain. The weather, as so often is the case here, is just wonderful.
Damon Hill, first. Michael Schumacher, second. João Alesi, third. Gerhard Berger, fourth. David Coulthard, 5th. Johnny Herbert, 6th. Eddie Irvine, 7th. Mika Hakkinen, 8th. Rubens Barrichello, 9th. Karl Wendlinger, 10th. Martin Brundle, 11th. Heinz Harald Frentzen, 12th. Nigel Mansell, 13th. Olivier Panis, 14th. Mika Salo, 15th. Gianni Morbidelli, 16th. Taki Inoue, 17th. Luca Badoer, 18th. Ukyo Katayama, 19th. Pierluigi Martini, 20th. Bill Brahma, 21st. Jos Verstappen, 22nd. Bertrand Gachot, 23rd. Roberto Moreno, 24th. Pedro Diniz, 25th. Domenico Ciatarella, 26th. Sitting there waiting for the race to start made me realize how much marvelous sponsoring there is on this track. I have a pretty mediocre start, which paradoxically saved me because cars in front of me started flying. That was Ukyo Katayama and Taki Inoue colliding, two Japanese drivers making contact. We have to capitalize on cars in front of us making mistakes and on this beautiful empty inside line. Sadly, my charge was stopped by Ukyo Katayama. His Tyrrell was missing front wing. I thought he was letting me by, so I tried to overtake him around the outside just for him to cross into my line and completely brake checked me. Thankfully, we still have our front wing attached to our car. But that wasn't the end of opening lap chaos. Nigel Mansell trying to rejoin the race after a collision with one of the Saubers. I couldn't really do anything, he just goes in front of me and slams on the brakes. Meanwhile, Nigel Mansell tries to overtake Karl Wendlinger, but he re-rams him. Austrian driver is now without rear wing, so that's his race over. All of the skills meant we are in 16th place, net 14 because Mansell has to pit, Wendlinger has to retire, and Mansell now holding cars in front of me. Now Badoer goes on the inside. I did not want to defend after what happened in San Marino and Argentina, but now we were all stuck in Mansell train. Morbidelli tried to capitalize on it and crashed into Badoer. I was very lucky that both of them managed to regain control of their cars and didn't slam into me. And with Badoer going wide in the last corner, this meant 14th position was safe for now. Yeah, Morbidelli overshoots the braking. No idea how Badoer's rear wing survived this crash. Maybe just those back of the grid cars are way sturdier than the midfield ones. Mika Salo had to went wide, there's a lot of dust in turn 3. But after getting closer to him, he has to have some kind of damage. He goes wide almost everywhere in Sector 1. Another good news for us, because normally we wouldn't be even able to stay behind him. On lap 5 he does exactly the same. Now I'm under pressure from Badoer, so I have to overtake Salo, and so maybe that will create a gap between us. I go on the inside, struggling to find grip there, but I managed to get the move done. So let's just pray Mika Salo is not fast enough to overtake me, but is fast enough to keep those cars behind me. Sadly, the reduced downforce that Mika Salo has works in his favor on the straight. He closes the gap almost instantly. I'm really vulnerable on the straight. Thankfully he was not close enough, but if I have a bad last corner, I might get overtaken by him. On the start-finish entrance, he's only 5 tenths behind, and by the time we approach the first corner, he's alongside me. He has that inside line, so I cannot do anything. But now his inside line turns into outside line. He goes wide, but manages to keep it on the track, so I tuck underneath him. But the fight is still not over. He once again has a better exit than me, and manages to create a small gap before we enter turn 4. I once again go on the inside, late braking for me, but I was not close enough, and he regains 13th position, and now Bader is right behind me. Luca Bader tries to go on the inside, he's too far back though, loses a bit of time. Mika Salo now goes wide again, and again. I picked the wrong line at the corner entry, and that's what has costed me the move. Now this time I was much closer into turn 4, but once again late braking, but I just don't have confidence in my car in turn 4 anymore. So that's another failed attack for me. Now Mika Salo goes wide in turn 12, that's a new one. I tried to attack him into turn 13, but I reminded myself how that has ended for Morbidelli, and tried to get into Salo's slipstream to defend against Bader. Again the same scenario into turn 3, we get past some front wings from an accident ahead, but this time we are equal by the time we enter turn 4. I'm on the inside for the 3rd time, so I have some experience now. And that's a successful move. As I was doing that, Rubens Barrichello tried to make a move on Michael Schumacher, but they collided, and that's the end of the race for Michael Schumacher. His rear wing is no longer attached to his car, so he has to go to the pits and retire. That wasn't what has happened though, because when I cross the start-finish line, I see a Benetton in the wall. Michael Schumacher decided not to go to the pits, and instead to retire the car on start-finish straight. And when Eddie Irvine tried to go past him, he turned into him and took him out. Massive accident, both of their drivers are fine, but Michael Schumacher has received 10th place grid penalty for the next race. All of this means we are already in 9th position. On lap 20, both me and Mika Salo went for our first pit stops. His second stint has to be shorter though, because he overtook me in the pits. It couldn't be front wing damage for the Finnish driver though, because he's still struggling for the grip. And that has made him an easy target. He goes wide in the last corner, but even with that and slipstream, I struggled to close the gap on the straight. We are just so underpowered, but we all know he's gonna go wide in turn 2 and turn 3. This time with much more experience, I pick a way better line in 3rd corner and manage to get the move done before we even enter turn 4. Damon tries to overtake Berger in turn 13, and that's 3rd collision in this corner today. It wasn't going much better for Coulthard though, since he suffered another brake failure and crashed into the back of Panis. That's of course the end of the race for both of them. On lap 31 I had a safe gap to Mika Salo, but my engine has exploded once again, sending me into a spin in turn 1. That's a 4th retirement in a row for me. I would very much like to finally finish a race. The race itself was won by Johnny Herbert, Jean Alesi was 2nd, Barrichello was 3rd, Damon Hill with 3rd, 4th place for Williams, Nigel Mansell on his return with 2 points, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen scores once again. My teammate has finished 2 races by now. Herbert's first win was enough to lift him to 4th position. Alesi extends the gap to Schumacher, and Barrichello with his 2 podiums is ahead of 2 Williams drivers. As much as I'm making fun of Mansell, he actually had a good race, going from that opening lap collision to scoring 2 points. In Constructors' Championship, Ferrari leads Benetton by 8 points, and Williams is 21 points behind. This might finally be the year where the championship goes to Maranello. I wonder when McLaren will finally bounce back after those last couple of years. Montreal, a track that I really like. Sadly it's the 1994 version, so we still have the weird chicane. And this also has the twisty bits instead of just a normal straight. Overall, not the best version of the circuit, but it will still do. But enough talking about the circuit itself. My first lap was good enough for 21st, so we are right on the pace. On my second lap, even though I was improving by 8 tenths, I managed to choke it in sector 3 and fall 1 tenth behind improvement. And when I tried to go to the pits, I forgot that my engine was overheated and I cooked it. This time it's my fault for blowing up the engine, so I'm not gonna complain. And with that, let's go to the race.
Hello there. Welcome to Canada. And the weather forecast for today? Well, unpredictable is all that can be said. It could improve, or it could just as easily worsen.
Johnny Herbert, first. David Coulthard, second. Damon Hill, third. Mika Hakkinen, fourth. Martin Brundle, fifth. Joe Alesi, sixth. Nigel Mansell, seventh. Olivier Panis, eighth. Eddie Irvine, ninth. Karl Wendlinger, 10th. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, 11th. Michael Schumacher, 12th. Gerhard Berger, 13th. Rubens Barrichello, 14th. Gianni Morbidelli, 15th. Mika Salo, 16th. Taki Inoue, 17th. Ukyo Katayama, 18th. Luca Badoer, 19th. Domenico Ciatarella, 20th. Pierluigi Martini, 21st. Jos Verstappen, 22nd. Bertrand Gachot, 23rd. Bill Brahma, 24th. Roberto Moreno, 25th. Pedro Diniz, 26th. The first rainy race of this career. Not a great launch of the line, but since it's my first rainy race, we can forgive that. I was just really uncertain of how much grip would I have. My teammate was doing much better though. Gachot managed to find a space down the inside and gained around 3 positions. This time it was me who had problems to capitalize on the start. Also, I'm sure that that thing that Diniz has done is most likely illegal. Of course, I'm not suggesting anything to FIA. Overall, my first lap wasn't good and it managed to get much worse. Since I overshot my braking into the hairpin and crashed into a Minardi, but it's also not completely my fault since he moved under braking and I will die on that hill. So I said hello to my pit crew really quickly this time. We are not changing the strategy though, we are continuing our one stop. Let's just see where we finish, if we finish at all, since that's looking unlikely recently. Coming out 30 seconds behind Jos Verstappen and losing another 3 after 10 laps is not looking good, but if I want this strategy to work, I cannot let those things into my mind. Since I cannot make any mistakes, I just have to drive my race. And maybe those positions will just come to us. And that's what started happening. Brundle and Panis had this interesting crash, and those on 2 and 3 stops slowly started coming in. And the deeper I got into this race, the more chaotic it has become. Somehow David Coulthard was just ahead of me, fighting with Roberto Moreno, who made a successful overtake on Williams' driver in the same place as Taki Inoue and Frentzen have collided, and somehow Pedro Diniz lost the most on that one, with the 40 driver getting on 2 wheels. Lucky for him, the pit lane was right in front of him. Coulthard had no pace this race, no idea if it was the setup, the car, damage, but it got to the point where he was actively slowing me down, so I had to overtake him. I tried to go round the outside in turn 2, it didn't work, but since he was so slow I could just attack him into turn 3, I got on the inside and it was 21st position for me. Some cars were going fast though, Herbert on lap 24 already lapping me, the British driver having an absolutely fantastic race so far. The same couldn't be said about Damon Hill, who had another retirement. Shortly after, Pedro Diniz had an engine failure, he had to stop in the middle of the track, and that caused a collision with Tyrrell of Ukyo Katayama. And then his teammate decided to get on the fan with this amazing display of wreck avoidance. Some proper Arca brakes right there. Herbert's great performance couldn't save him from engine problems. After leading the entire race, he has to retire. His sudden braking surprised Jos Verstappen, who crashed into the back of him. Joe Alesi and Ferrari had some problems which they couldn't repair in the box, so he had to retire. Not only top teams were having problems though, Mika Salo suffered a brake failure into the hairpin. A really massive crash, but he's safe. With all of that chaos, by the time I entered the pit lane for my first planned pit stop, I was already in 9th position, and the Simtek of Ciatarella was in 10th. If we just survive this race, we can get a really good finish here. During the pit stop I only lost 2 positions, but the rain was slowly stopping, so we still will probably have to make another pit stop for dry tires. And that's a second retirement for Ferrari. Berger's engine has exploded. And with the rain stopping, a clear dry line has started to appear. So I really have to follow my race engineer in order to know when do we switch to the dry tires? Talking about following, right there I noticed that Jos Verstappen is not following me anymore. And looking at the replay, you could easily tell why. At least that means I don't have to look in my rear mirror anymore. Panis had a brake failure coming into Champions of Wall. Lucky him. And hearing about increased activity in the pit lane on lap 43, I pitted for slick tires. I came out in 9th, 12 seconds ahead of Moreno and 12 seconds behind Morbidelli. It's also the furthest into the race I got in this career so far. Seeing Coulthard's rear wing, however, told me I still have to be careful. The Scottish driver just misjudged the grip and crashed into the wall, taking himself out of the race. He wasn't the only driver in front of me having issues though, because brakes in the footwork of Gianni Morbidelli have failed. That meant I moved into P8 with prospects of P7 right in front of me. However, I got overexcited and went for a really poor dive bomb attempt that I'm almost certain slightly damaged my car, and it wasn't really necessary since I got way better run into the first corner. But now, however, I was only one position behind the points. The position which was occupied by our rivals Simtek. They won't be our rivals for very long though, because there are already voices all over the paddock saying they will probably go bankrupt before Magny-Cours. My Pacific was really good in these dry conditions, and Chattarella was the last driver to box for slicks, so his tires were still cold. This gave me an opportunity to overtake him in the last corner, but remembering what happened with Inoue, I backed down, wait for a better opportunity which came lap later where he had a massive moment in turn 13, which allowed me to overtake him in the last chicane. 2 laps later, blue flags were shown, so I had to let Nigel Mansell pass. But after that I realized something is wrong. I'm hearing 3 cars instead of 2. And that's when I looked in the mirror and noticed that Michael Schumacher is right behind me. He was so much faster that not scoring any points was almost certain. No matter what I did, I couldn't get rid of him, but somehow a lap later I was still ahead of him, and that's when I noticed that his engine has gave up. We were safe. It's true when both Benettons retire, it's always from the same issue. There was double gearbox DNF and now double engine DNF. Häkkinen's McLaren was also slowing down, his brakes were slowly giving up, and in turn 6 he just couldn't stop the car. Badoer also made contact with Häkkinen's car. That gave Barrichello second position. Brazilian couldn't celebrate for very long because on lap 64 his gearbox gave up. If nothing bad happens, we will get 3 points from this race. And thankfully, my car has survived. Nigel Mansell has won the race, finally finished a race, and we finished it in the points. 4th position for us, this gives us 3 points. What a crazy race, and what an amazing result for our team. Honestly, this race traumatized me for a bit, because the amount of near misses and accidents that happened near me was just too much. We had Jos Verstappen crashing right behind me rear-ending Martini. Schumacher almost took me out while he had that engine failure, but somehow we reached the end of this race. Now let's take a look at Drivers' Championship. Now Mansell is tied with Berger and he's only 10 points behind Alesi, even though he missed 3 rounds of the season. But of course, most of the chaos has happened in the midfield. Katayama now has 6 points and is equal with Damon Hill and ahead of Häkkinen. Badoer is ahead of Frentzen. I'm in 15th ahead of Irvine, and both footworks have scored points. With that win, McLaren is now ahead of Williams. The comeback is real. Minardi is ahead of Sauber. We are tied with Sauber. And Simtek has 2 points. No matter what's after this race, it probably will be a letdown. My only experience here is Roblox race from 3 years ago, which I lost on the last lap after my car got a mechanical failure. And those weren't even a thing, my car bugged and suspension collapsed. So those are very optimistic news. Even though it wasn't raining, it was quite the opposite actually. The circuit for the first part of qualifying was wet, and it took about 30 minutes for it to dry out. This means this qualifying will be a little more crowded. I had a car in front of me even when I was finishing my first lap, which was good enough to put me 19th, although it's still the beginning of the qualifying, so doesn't matter that much. As I went for my second lap, I attacked the curb in turn 1 too much, and that unsettled my car. It wasn't all lost though, I managed to save it, but I just went wide. and on the gravel, that lap is gone. Time for my third lap. A little bit too carefully out of the last corner, but it's fine. Still a good acceleration that start-finish line. In first corner I repeat the mistake from my previous qualifying lap. This time I overcorrected and into the wall. A massive crash that brings the end of my qualifying session.
Hello there. Welcome to France. And the weather forecast for today? Well, unpredictable is all that can be said. It could improve, or it could just as easily worsen.
Another rainy Grand Prix. My qualifying lap was enough to give me 22nd on the grid. This start was bad, but I have another excuse: I couldn't see the starting lights. So of course, drivers ahead are gonna have better start than me. It could be worse because Karl Wendlinger didn't even get off the line. Conditions were tricky and they caught Yukio Katayama off guard. He has spun going into turn 3. That made me lose my confidence in the car, so I lost a lot of time on the exit of the corner and the straight which it was leading to. Thankfully the field was still bunched up and there was a lot of fighting going on, so it didn't take me long to regain that time. Although I tried to accelerate too hard and nearly spun, drivers in front weren't so keen on this running away from us thing. Combined with all of the fighting between them, meant not only I caught up to them, but I was also stuck in their train, which was pretty slow and chaotic. Two things I didn't want to experience. I got my opportunity to leave this train when David Coulthard suffered an engine failure. I got too focused on trying to avoid him, missed my braking point, went wide, spun, and lost 3 seconds and 3 positions. Gashot, being a very nice teammate he is, decided to give me his position after he had to box for a new front wing. On lap 8 some drivers wanted to pit for wet tires, but they aquaplaned into the wall at pit entry, bringing red flag. I'm gonna be honest for a second here, I forgot about spare cars existing, so even though David Coulthard and Karl Wendlinger should have taken the restart, they didn't. So let's just say Sauber and Williams had some issues with the spare car, okay? Okay, everybody agrees? That's cool. Now let's go to the restart. On the restart I'm still suffering from the same issue as on my first start, but I had a way better launch of the line. Brundle was close to overtaking me, but he hit into the wall. Pedro Diniz had to have some problems here, he was basically standing on the start-finish straight. Very good news for us, less time we lose behind 40s is always better. Moreno in front moves under braking in the same way as Pierluigi Martini did in Canada. That of course caught me off guard, but I managed to keep it under control, probably the finest piece of Grand Prix driving I displayed this week. With that, before I even entered sector 3 I was ahead of 240s, so I minimized the time lost behind them as much as I could. With that I started closing the gap to Katayama. I didn't want to be right behind him through the fast corners, so I lifted off a little bit, made some room between us, but then I went late on the brakes and off the track, losing all the positions I gained on the opening lap. Martin Brundle in his leisure is struggling to find the pace, he's stuck behind 40, while getting desperate he went on the gravel, lost a bit of time. Now Gashot is trying to overtake him, but he noticed that I'm right behind him and I have way better run, so he tucked behind Martin and gave me some space to let me overtake them both, but as soon as I lost the slipstream, my car has become much slower, so I was stuck in this really awkward position, but Martin Brundle braked too early, and I managed to find a gap to overtake them both. So now I have to find a way to overtake 40 of Pedro Diniz, but I bottomed out on the curb in turn 1, just like I did in qualifying. But I keep calm and the car is fine. My race really isn't. Martin Brundle, trying to overtake 40, has spun himself on the curb. That also blocked my teammate, so once again we were all fighting together. But then, trying to find some time to catch up to them, I did the same thing as Brundle. My ride height for this race might have been a little bit too low. 12 laps later, Gashot is still stuck behind a 40, and the fact I caught up to them again shows just how slow the Italian team is. Since Gashot finally pitted, I had a free hand to overtake 40, so it was time for me to finally close the gap, but my engine gave me a favor and finally took me out of this misery. After making basically 0 mistakes in Canada, and scoring 3 points after a really good drive in changeable conditions, I've done this. I hate Magny Course. This track sucks. I'm still salty about that Roblox race, by the way. After Schumacher crashed into the backmarker who stopped his car in the middle of the track, Mansell won this race with Alesi being in second, Schumacher finished the podium, Barrichello was fourth, and Frentzen was sixth. I'm sorry I have little to no footage of this, I just wanted to get this over with. So I skipped to the end of it without really watching it. Schumacher's incident is the only thing I saw. Now let's take a look at Drivers' Championship. Mansell somehow has become a championship contender, now being only 6 points behind Alesi. He's also the first driver to win 2 races in a row. Schumacher again lost points to Alesi, Herbert is now tied with Berger, Barrichello still going strong, he's only 1 point behind them, and Frentzen gets another point. A really boring race in terms of the championship. And now Constructors' Championship. Ferrari leads, Benetton is second, McLaren only 5 points behind them, Williams still struggles to find consistent point scoring finishes, and Barrichello is nearly single-handedly dragging Jordan to that 5th position in Constructors' Championship. And thanks to Frentzen, Sauber is now tied with Minardi for 8th. Let's just forget about this race and go to Silverstone. My footage from this race looks like this. So I'm gonna quickly go over it, and then we go to the German Grand Prix. Massimiliano Papis replaced Gianni Morbidelli in footwork, Coulthard took pole position, Damon Hill completed the front row, Herbert was 3rd, Schumacher was in 5th, Berger was 6th, Alesi was 8th, and Nigel Mansell was 9th. So there was potential here for Williams and Benetton to finally catch up to Ferrari, and I qualified in amazing 15th. In the race, Williams dominated until Massimiliano Papis on lap 16 had a suspension failure and stopped in the middle of the track. Both Williamses crashed into the back of him and lost their front wings, and that gave Eddie Irvine the lead. Frentzen had a brake failure and rear-ended Hakkinen. My engine gave up after 33 laps. Williamses were faster than Eddie Irvine, but they couldn't find a place to overtake him. So Eddie Irvine won this race, being 1 second ahead of Damon Hill, 2.5 seconds ahead of David Coulthard, and 5 seconds ahead of Barrichello. Mansell was 5th, and Schumacher only scored 1 point. Oh yeah, Jean Alesi had a suspension failure, but he was running outside of the points, so doesn't matter. Really important race for Williams. All of the top teams had some issues, so they scored 10 points. Sadly for them, Jordan had an amazing race, with Eddie Irvine winning and Barrichello finishing 4th. They got 13 points out of this race. But realistically, Jordan is not gonna keep this pace up through the entire season. If Williams manages to keep this form up, with 2 cars finishing from now on, combined with their amazing pace, they might at least challenge Benetton for 2nd place in Constructor Championship. Really important race for Eddie Irvine. This race gave him a chance to close the gap in the points to his teammate, with race wins being really important in the system. And now, let's go to Hockenheim. Hockenheim, a halfway point through this season and also the last race of this episode. To anyone who has stuck around till this round, thank you for watching. You're probably crazy or unemployed. Don't worry, you're not alone, I've done this. Now let's focus on the qualifying after this quick outro and we're going home. I have a Roblox league for which I have to practice, I cannot spend time on this. In practice, the pace wasn't looking strong, we were having troubles with being faster than 40s. But at the end, I found something that worked, and was fast enough to put me in 21st, ahead of my teammate Lavaggi. Because our financial situation is not looking good, Gashot stepped down to let more paid drivers in, to give us a chance to finish this season. Am I worried? Of course not. My second lap put me in 18th. Which became 21st again when I was on my 3rd lap, on which I spun. Maybe I should be worried. But neither my teammate or the 240s were fast enough to take that 21st spot from me. Honestly, I'm expecting a really boring race. I'm comfortably faster than the cars behind, and not fast enough to battle with cars ahead.
Hello there. Welcome to Germany. The weather, as so often is the case here, is just wonderful.
David Coulthard, first. Damon Hill, second. Michael Schumacher, third. Johnny Herbert, fourth. Gerhard Berger, fifth. Karl Wendlinger, sixth. Jean Alesi, seventh. Eddie Irvine, eighth. Mika Hakkinen, ninth. Aguri Suzuki, 10th. Rubens Barrichello, 11th. Olivier Panis, 12th. Nigel Mansell, 13th. Heinz Harald Frentzen, 14th. Luca Badoer, 15th. Taki Inoue, 16th. Mika Salo, 17th. Pierluigi Martini, 18th. Ukyo Katayama, 19th. Massimiliano Papis, 20th. Bill Brahma, 21st. Giovanni Lavaggi, 22nd. Pedro Diniz, 23rd. Roberto Moreno, 24th. For this race, I finally removed this weird semi-transparent bar on the top of the screen. The game looks much better now. Mediocre launch, still better than the cars behind. Front wings already flying. It's Pierluigi Martini who's currently missing a wing. I thought I'm gonna overtake Papis here, but he swiftly moved ahead of me. Going on the inside was really bad for me. I haven't carried enough speed into that straight line, which is very long here, and the cars in front have just better engines. So even if I had a better exit, it wouldn't matter. We cannot really do anything in this race. Even though Martini was missing a front wing, he caught me off guard with this dive bomb. I was really scared he's gonna slow me down for obvious reasons, but I managed to re-overtake him into the next chicane. And just look at the speed difference. We cannot do anything. The race got interesting for a moment on lap 6, where I saw a wrecked Minardi and heard about Barrichello missing his rear wing. Replay revealed that Barrichello was retiring the car, and Badoer went wide, crashed into him, then both Tyrrells crashed into Badoer, but they were still able to continue, so only people retiring from this one are Barrichello and Badoer. Wendlinger has decided to take a revenge for Spain and did this beautiful maneuver, which resulted in Mansell losing his front right wheel. Bad luck for Jordan continued when Irvine suffered a brake failure, crashing into the back of Berger, taking them both out of the race. Berger is yet to score after San Marino. Another unlucky race for Damon Hill, whose car stopped in sector 3. By the way, just look at this rear wing. It's so flat. Lap 26, my first and only pit stop. I came out in 12th, 1 second behind Katayama and 12 seconds ahead of Moreno. On my outlap I lost 2 seconds to Katayama, so there goes the opportunity for that fight. And just barely 5 laps before the end of this race, my engine has started smoking. If I'm lucky, I will be able to finish this race. In an effort to conserve my engine, I had to slow down a little bit, which allowed Katayama to catch up to me and promptly overtake me. And then Inoue, whom I didn't even notice, took the same opportunity. And just 2 sectors before the end, boom, engine kaput. And that's my 7th DNF. David Coulthard won it, Schumacher was 2nd, Herbert was 3rd, Alesi in 4th, Wendlinger in 5th, and Papis has scored 1 point in his 2nd race of his career. With 8 rounds to go, Drivers' Championship is looking spicy. The difference between Alesi and Schumacher is just 4 points. Mansell is slowing a little bit. Ever since Silverstone, Coulthard and just Williams in general are looking very strong. Herbert only in 5th, 11 points behind his teammate, but we have to remember how many points he has lost thanks to reliability. He lost a win in Canada, a podium in Brazil, a podium in Argentina. So if he starts finishing races, he can very easily fight with Coulthard for that 3rd spot in Drivers' Championship. Berger haven't scored points since San Marino, so he is on an absolute stinker of a run. Hill is always up there in qualifying and out in the races. With him only having 12 points and Williams being more unreliable than Benetton, I think 5th position is maximum for him. Ferrari and Benetton are tied for Constructors' Championship. Berger's inability to score points is costing Ferrari big time, and that Williams is closing in. McLaren and Jordan fighting for the best of the rest, and Ligier is pretty comfortable in that 6th spot. 40 remains the only team to yet score points. And that's the end of German Grand Prix and this episode. Now let's go to the outro. Okay, and that's the first part of the 1995 season. Only in editing I realized how big this project is. So I have no idea when the 2nd episode is gonna come out. Most likely before that, there will be a 1994 BPR race, which is also gonna be counted for this career. You know, it's to give my driver some lore before his F1 career. And also, I just like GTR2, I wanna play it. I compared the International F3000 calendar to the BPR one, so that's gonna be something that fills the break between the episodes. It's also not the last time my driver will appear in a sports car race. I wanna do as much of them as I can, but the further I go into my career, the better teams are just gonna expect me to focus entirely on F1. Meanwhile, in SimTech, I can just kinda mess around as long as I give them the money. So Le Mans 95 is not out of the question, especially as Gashot has driven in it for Honda. I think that's everything I wanted to say. If somebody watched this video till the end, thank you. I don't know what to say really. This took me around 2 months. Yeah, so thank you for watching. It means a lot. Just leave a comment saying something nice like, oh, this was great. If you hated it, just type go fuck yourself in the comments. Now I'm off to set up the BPR race. Bye.